Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Farm to Fame podcast, Conversations with Ali Cox. I have an incredible gentleman joining the show today. Welcome, CJ Bruce of The Missing Ingredient.
Thanks, Ali. It's great to be here.
Couldn't be more thrilled. I feel like I say the same thing over and over again. Like, I never think my competitors or other marketing agencies, I actually think it's stigma in the industry of having terrible experiences. And so, having a fellow small business owner who is focused in a very similar space as us is truly like, it feels like his mate, CJ, and also just props to us for like being friends. And like 2 seconds ago, I was like, is there anything we can pitch together? So anyway, just thrilled to have you. And again, thanks for being here. And there is so much room for all of us in this industry, because I think we can completely agree that we are just scratching the surface and what should be happening in agriculture, food, and beverage ingredient marketing. So
Absolutely.
for sure. Okay, so CJ, let's just sort of like table set for a second, if you would appease me. Share a little bit about kind of how you got started. And I believe it was more through the technical route. As a founder, we all have our own journeys and would love to hear a little bit about that. And then how we got to deciding to brand to The Missing Ingredient.
Yeah, happy to. It starts for me in really storytelling. So I actually studied film and TV in college and moved out to LA to get into the entertainment industry, made some of my own stuff. All my friends and family saw it. And then it was, how do I get other people to see it? And that's really what got me into marketing. And
Okay.
then I pretty quickly realized that I was more interested and better at the marketing aspect than I was at film and TV. And so that evolved into viral video marketing for larger brands and working with large agencies. So like brands like IKEA and Gatorade and Ford. Did that for a while, and then got to a point where I really wanted to bring that expertise to, brands in an industry that I really had more passion for and thought that we could, make more of an impact in their businesses. And so that's what led me into food and beverage, and then started The Missing Ingredient in 2016.
Okay, love this. So it really was like you were filling a need. Aren't, like, in your opinion, I know my opinion is like everything good always comes from like actually solving a problem versus sort of thinking like a what if kind of situation, but more like what is the challenge and why isn't this better? I feel like that's been like the whole baseline of my entire career, but it sounds like that literally was how you earned a living in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. It was there. There was a clear need here. In the earliest days was, being like a translator of technical things to non-technical people. And so
Okay.
having the understanding of, how these things work, being willing to experiment, and then being able to communicate that in a way that didn't make people feel like it was condescending or like they didn't totally understand, being comfortable asking questions. So I feel like that's, it's a sweet spot for me and sitting in between those two places.
Okay, no, like no wonder you're so good at your job. Of course you're good at your job. That's like the whole point of it all. So so then 2016, you founded The Missing Ingredient. I would love to know more. So how did you transition as sort of being a generalist into agriculture and food?
Yeah, so it really became so the beginning of the agency was a little more general. It was kind of like I
Okay.
wanted to work with things that were having an impact. That
Mm,
was kind of my foundational piece. So we worked with some nonprofits and a variety of sectors. And then a couple of years in, it felt too like we were spread too thin and couldn't really concentrate. And so I took a look at where we had worked, where we had done good work, and where, my passions and the team's passions lied. And food and beverage at the time was about half the work. And
mm,
so that's where it's like, if we were going to focus on one thing,
mm,
food and beverage would be it. And I'm personally passionate about food and beverage outside of all the marketing aspects, how
mhm.
it's grown, how it's sourced, the act of eating, the culture around it, the community aspect. There's just so many different, as you know, and I know we shared this passion,
Mhm.
so many different layers to it. And then from an industry, and then also the storytelling aspects, and it's a fun space to work in from a marketing perspective as well. And so all of those things combined to really help us focus in and really double down on food and beverage.
I love it. How has marketing food changed from 10 years ago to today?
So many ways. I think
Nerd out.
the
DJ, this
yeah,
is the safe space to nerd out.
it's a
Go
safe
for
space. Yeah, you think about, I mean, the ways that people discover food, the ways that people shop. basically every way that you can interact with it, I think has evolved and changed. Like you can have, let's just start with shopping. So going into the grocery store, purchasing your product at the store and finding what you want, making a shopping list, going to do that. Then shopping online, which just the evolution of what it means to grocery shop online. You have things
Right.
like Instacart, but then now it's every retailer that you can go and you can find your groceries online, get it delivered to you at your house or go for pickup. And then the influence of social media, obviously, like what are people eating? They're sharing what they're eating. You're having influencers online where you're learning about new foods from from them and getting we talk about it as like a virtual tasting experience, right? Somebody that you love, that you like and you trust, and they have similar tastes or interests to you, and then you see them try something new, and then that introduces you to it. Uh, and then the food trends, I think especially in the last few years with like the rise of TikTok and short form video,
Mhm.
really then inspiring people to actually go and find those new foods and try it themselves and then share that experience, and that whole feedback loop
Mhm.
has been a big shift. And then the ever shifting lanes of food trends, and I think like now more, which I'm grateful for. I feel like it's coming back to real food, where there's keto and there's fill in the blanks of all the trends that have
Mhm.
happened. But I think now more recently, people are questioning where their food is from and what's in their food, wanting to understand that more, and just getting back to simpler quality ingredients, which is
Yeah.
great.
Interesting. Something you just said. I'd love for your thought on the difference between a diet trend and a food trend.
Interesting. So I guess I think about like on a food trend, I think that can come out as like what you're actually eating independent of the dietary restrictions or concerns. So it could be an ingredient piece, right? So there could be popular, think like yuzu as a, trending citrus, where then you see yuzu and everything,
Yeah.
right? Or packaged goods too. Like there was a couple years ago, like the Japanese mayonnaise, which is just then trending and showing up in all of these different ingredients, and people are going to utilize that. Where
Mhm.
diet trends tend to be more about restrictions
Mhm.
and okay, I'm not going to have this or I'm not going to have that. And a lot of it can also be, connected to hacks where people still want to have those things, but how
Mhm.
can I have it be, fully keto or fully plant-based
Mhm.
version of, you know, mac and cheese, or fill in the kind of comfort food or classic foods that are then spun around that.
Mhm.
Uh, and then sometimes they intersect, where you have the ingredient or recipe trend that is intersecting with one of
Yeah.
those diet trends.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting to see also just the longer term, like what has staying power, which versus what is kind of a flash in the pan. And I
Mhm.
think we try to think about the like people want to, you're just talking about, want to eat whole food, want to eat generally, healthier food, but also needs to taste good. And so
Mhm.
those things tend to be staying power, where like some of the very specific diet uh, aspects are a little more trending and a
Yeah.
lot harder to kind of build a long-term strategy around.
For sure. For sure. So, CJ, one of the pieces of work that the missing ingredient has worked on that I am personally a fan and talk about all the time is the sumo citrus. And I think that the messaging and the strategy around, frankly, honoring and championing like seasonality is
Mhm.
so, oh gosh, it's like, it's textbook. It is so good. And I would love if you could share a little bit about it. From a
Yeah.
value add perspective and building a brand around a whole food, I think it is like chef's kiss. So congratulations to you and your team. But I would
Thank you.
love it if you wanted to share a little bit about kind of how that came to be.
Yeah, we love Sumo Citrus. It's been so we're going on our sixth season working with Sumo, and it's amazing. It's an amazing product to work on. It's an amazing team to work with, and so yeah, like you said, you touched on the seasonality piece and some of these differences in working in produce, versus working in consumer packaged goods. So you
Mhm.
have built-in seasonality, which is
Mhm.
something we really leaned in from the beginning. Like you have essentially this urgency that's natural to the product itself. And so
Mhm.
you get an anticipation and the hype leading up to the season, and then a short window to really maximize on the product being available, everyone, all of the fans engaging with it. And so a lot of it for us came down to looking at those, what's inherent to the brand and the product itself, So like the seasonality, they're early fans of the product. How
Mhm.
do we amplify those things to really create an event around the season as it comes? And
Mhm.
then the fans, that's one of the most fun parts. It's like I'll tell you a quick story. When I first started working on the project, we
Mhm.
were pitching on it actually, and I told a friend of mine who I was having coffee with that we were talking to Sumo Citrus, and he just lit up and was like, "Sumo Citrus, have you had it?" It's like, I haven't tried it yet. It just goes off on,
Like,
how great his
get ten
product is.
dollars out and let's go to the grocery store and buy an orange.
Let's do it. Let's do it and share it. Get the value out of it. But that was my first exposure to just how much people love the product.
Yeah.
And when you have a great product at the core, it makes everything else easier. So our job is really, how do we amplify that? How do we tell that story in different ways? How do we reach different, communities and subcultures with the brand, and
Mhm.
then really bring it to life and build it over, what's coming on 6 years now. So it's great. It's such a great fun product to work on.
And CJ, how have you and your team sort of addressed that price? I mean, I joke about it, but seriously, how have you guys sort of addressed the price point for a mandarin orange?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ali. So it starts with education, that
Okay.
really helping people understand just how difficult it really is to grow a sumo citrus. And so
Mm,
there's a lot of telling the story from the farm, and the product gets sunscreen on it because it's so sensitive, right? Like these little nuggets that you're not going to get, and it's hard to tell. And just like at shelf at the store, you see sumo
right,
citrus next to the other commodity products. So it is really where the online storytelling comes in, the website, social press, and we have some partner agencies that we work with on it as well, and creative storytelling and PR to get that story out there. And then also on social, it's answering people's questions around, again, yeah, people oftentimes will say how expensive it is, how much it costs. And on the flip side, we have people who say, this is worth every penny because it is a great quality experience. And I
mhm,
know, when I go and I buy a sumo citrus, I'm gonna have a great piece of fruit. And then there's people hoarding it for themselves because it's like, well, this is a high value
yeah,
item.
yeah,
Or even looking back to the heritage of the fruit, so the decopan in Japan, where
mm,
it is a high value, and it's actually given as a gift because of that. Like it's because it's so, again, carefully grown and crafted to get to that point. So figuring out ways to tell that story and really get down to the farmer level of the passion around it, what it takes to grow it,
mhm,
and then how it differentiates from even other decopons on the market that have that there are very there's a small amount of competitors that are out there, but the quality isn't there. And because Sumo Citrus as a brand has these standards of
mhm,
a certain level of sweetness, a certain size, all of these things
mhm.
that really help to give that amazing experience. And then that's part of why it is a more expensive piece of fruit.
Yeah. Well, obviously the farming that goes into it and the sunscreen on the peel and on all of it, and I'm sure the logistics are very intertwined to deliver that quality experience. I just want to say that the branding and the reach is just as much of a quality experience. So
Hmm.
truly, like it's been something beautiful to watch. Like when I see out of home billboards in urban cities with like matching what's happening at the point of sale, which matching the experience that's happening on digital, on email newsletter, on social, like it's just a beautiful sight. And how did you get your client on board with doing things literally different from everybody else? With maybe like if I'm gonna would like think of like what would be an adjacent like maybe like Wonderful Pistachio would maybe be
Hmm.
like only one other. I can only really think of like that brand that's like truly doing something very, very different from within ag.
Yeah, yeah. I think the avocados from Mexico comes to mind too. Is maybe kind of doing some different things. Well, I'll give a shout out to both and, which is our creative agency partner on this as well. And we really work hand in hand in determining where is the media going to be placed and what is the experience and how do we match the message and the quality of the creative there. And really, and then also to the client, we really built this together. So when we started, they had recently updated the branding, but it
Mhm,
was just the kind of logo that was basically it, right? It was like, okay, well, we have this now, what does it actually mean and how do we live into the brand and define that across all channels? And then also, how does it translate, like you mentioned, some of these high impact high cost placements like out of home, in large cities, also running TV ad campaigns.
mhm,
And then what does that mean on social? Because we found that same type of creative doesn't really resonate on social. And so how do we capture the essence of the brand and have it feel like a consistent brand experience and message across those channels, while
Mhm.
still leaning into what drives performance
Mhm.
in, again, an environment like social, like Instagram or TikTok, as compared to a TV spot or out of home, where it
Mhm.
all still feels Sumo Citrus and you're really in that environment. And
Right.
I'd say, yeah, going back to the client side, like they've really, they really are stewards of the brand and help to push that. And it's such a great collaboration for everyone who's on the project. We'll try to push things in a direction where we think it'll drive performance. We get pushed back where maybe it's like not totally, doesn't totally feel like the brand doesn't capture that. And then we find the space that really is that the creative tension that then leads to the best work.
Mm.
So I think it's that true collaboration across different agency teams and the client team to get that output that you just described.
Well, it's super special. Congratulations for being part of a super dynamic team. And
Thanks.
yeah, no, it's just been a beautiful thing. It's aspirate. Like I mentioned sumo citrus in so many of my client meetings where I'm like, well, do we want to go sumo citrus or do we want to go here? As like it's definitely like, on the more progressive side. And I think it's just something that's super beautiful to experience. So thank you for that.
I love it.
And then I think just like kind of like CJ, like in conclusion, where do you think we're going from an ag marketing and like digital advertising perspective? Like where are we headed as a nuanced, nichey little industry?
It's a good question. I think part of the things I think about, I mean, one connects to Sumo Citrus, and I might be, biased in this thinking, but I do feel like there's a lot of opportunity to tell more branded experience stories, right? And create those branded experiences within ag. I
Mm,
just think it's white space, and you go to some of these shows, and I mean, obviously there's great work that's happening out there, but I still think there's more opportunity. And again, going back to that, the trends of whole foods and people wanting to know where their food comes from, and obviously doesn't get more whole food than produce or the core ingredients, right? Like rice,
exactly.
beans, etc. So that telling those stories,
Mhm.
and then I think the ways that consumers are interacting with things. So this is getting more on the technical side. So people are discovering things in new ways. AI obviously is a big aspect of that. People are now chatting with AI and using AI as a thought partner to think about what are they going to cook and where are they going to shop. And so showing up in those places, and how do you do that in the best way, and how I think about, how is that going to evolve and change the work that we do, like we talked about earlier, right? How has it changed over the last 10 years? I think the next 10 years is going to be exponentially more change than
Mhm.
the previous 10.
Okay.
So
So buckle
constantly thinking about that. Buckle up, be, willing to test, willing to learn. And I think there's lessons in ag for other industries too, and how I think like some things that I've learned in ag, just the patience, right? And you're at the mercy of nature. And
Mhm.
so this longer term thinking, and like, okay, yeah, we don't know exactly how the crop is going to turn out or what the quality or the volume is going to be, and the usable yield, and all of these, the seasonality, all of these things that I think are
Mhm.
great reminders that it's things are out of our control, and we can make our best plans and have contingency plans, but really be along for the ride.
For sure. And I think that you bring up a great that you're up. I'm with you. I think we struggle with some of our clients with media about performance media versus brand awareness media, and how in fresh produce there's truly no roadmap for that because seasonality is so critical and there are so many different elements that actually impact the quality of a product. So more on that, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the measurement piece is a key piece. Like it's something that we developed a lot with Sumo Citrus over the years, and ways to how do we measure, awareness? How do we track that ultimately to sales? And what does it mean, to grow a brand? And I think, and especially with, agriculture and seasonal products too, like building an audience that you own, I think is a really important piece to think about, right? That you can continue to communicate with over time, that you can come back to. And so like an example to be, it's somewhat counterintuitive from the outset, is building an email list. Like
Mhm.
you think like, oh yeah, I'm not a direct to consumer brand selling online, but that's the way for you to own your audience. You have a direct way to communicate with them. You can take that audience to different channels. You can ask them questions.
Mhm.
So just an example of something that I think is, obvious in other spaces that is not as obvious in ag, that has a
Mhm.
lot of value and potential.
For sure. Oh, awesome. Well, CJ, this has been incredible. And thank you for sharing. And thanks for sharing some of the secret sauce behind the Sumo brand and the brand execution. So, pleasure to have you on the podcast, and keep on doing great work.
Thanks, Ali. Really appreciate it. It's great to be on.